Hello and welcome to the keynote on the, a panel discussion on the future of private 5G in IoT. I want to say, first of all, thank you ever so much to Kalleido for that fantastic keynote discussion. It was good to have the stage very fully set about what the IoT can do for us and where we can go with it. Just a quick introduction to myself and where this will be going. I am James Moore. I'm a principal analyst with Kalleido Intelligence, an industry analyst firm focusing on connectivity and the IoT. And we will be discussing with the main part of this session will be with a panel of fantastic experts on private networks, looking at what 5G can bring to the IoT for private networks. First of all, I was going to set the stage briefly and with a presentation just to say where everything is going for the IoT and how 5G works. So first of all, just an overall presentation on what where private networks are in general. Our survey that was conducted in H1 of this year noted that there is a large amount of interest in private networks. You can see there's quite a considerable amount of folks that are looking to consider private networks within their IoT deployments, but there's not an awful lot of actual adoption. And so that for all of the noise that's being made in the industry about private networks, there's not a lot of take up with it. Part of the reason for that, and particularly with private 5G, is because there's not too much in the way of hardware ecosystem support. If you are going to be looking to deploy private 5G, then you're going to have to struggle to find any endpoint devices. An awful lot of it is just routers, gateways, those sorts of products. And so until the ecosystem can build out to support things beyond, say, smartphones and tablets and those sorts of things, you're going to see some hesitancy around the use of private 5G. And so that's why we're seeing people still considering, and it's kind of at that cusp point where LTE can potentially do a lot of jobs as well. And so where do they invest? What kind of technologies do they go in? So we get seeing quite an uncertain market, and 5G is still rolling out its capabilities as well. So there's the question of, if it's deployed now, will it cause problems to try and update to some additional capabilities later, those sorts of questions. So primarily it's the idea of education is needed in the market about what sort of things are the best things for people to deploy with, what the technologies are that will solve people's use cases. And that's kind of a running theme that we've seen at Kalleido with how everything is deployed for private networks in general. Secondly, private networks is not only a nascent market, but an international market. There's an awful lot of interest in looking at multi-regional connectivity for private networks across a large degree of verticals, particularly for equipment makers. But we can see here that there's an awful lot of concern that that things need to be international, particularly at the provisioning stage as well. And because if you're looking to source a particular device and you need to have it brought from overseas, then you need to be able to connect it and provision it and make sure that that initial stage of setup is all done and can be completed without any hiccups. And that goes for pretty much every industry out there. And although if you look here, there's significant variance within the industries, that healthcare, which is thinking purely in terms of campus networks and not looking to roam and those sorts of things, they're thinking very much, we don't need roaming, we don't need international connectivity, and are looking to keep things quite in one place. Whereas you've got smart cities and the industrial and manufacturing market that are thinking already quite internationally and deploying to different cities for their devices. And so there is that concern that that international connectivity is there. And it's also quite an unclear market. As we've noted already, there's some questions about what 5G can do, what private networks can do. The main concerns about private networks in general is how secure they will be, because people aren't that familiar with how to set up private cellular networks, and so they aren't really knowing what the security implications are, particularly if you're looking for those isolated single campus deployments where you just are in a bubble and don't need to connect to anywhere else. You've also got quite a large amount of people who are saying, well, they require very specific features and private networks may not cover them. But that can be solved quite easily by talking about education about what solutions can be delivered. So again, we're talking about, don't talk about technologies, don't look at what you can do with the technologies that you have, absolutely. But if you're trying to get people to adopt, they need to know what it can do. Can it solve their problem? Which is a perennial IoT question, but it's having severe impacts on the space at the moment. Because there's also some level of doubt about how to check whether private networks are a good fit for their organization. There is some need for testing and validation and so on. So as much as there is some talk in the market at the moment about the pilot stage of private networks ending and things moving into production, that's the first wave of private networks. And so with the kind of the wider enterprise picture, then there's still very much the need for pilots, the need for testing, the need to show that private networks can deliver a return on investment that makes it worth it. So in order to do that, you also need to be able to speak the language. So speaking to specific problems. So being able to form partnerships within verticals to make sure that specific software works within the network, for example, that things that folks are wanting to use and already integrating into their workflows will already transition to private networks and potentially be improved. Those sorts of factors need to be catered for to ease that sense of not really knowing what the private networks can deliver. And now we've talked about private networks, we can talk about 5G. Just to recap on the acronyms, the enhanced mobile broadband can deliver high system capacity and support of large amount of devices, a high data rate, and provide a wide coverage area. This is the capabilities that you're looking for fixed wireless access and supply of general connectivity for both consumer and enterprise. There's been a lot of interest about using this to reach out to rural communities, for example. But within the enterprise, this sort of a use case is used to potentially cover and connect for devices that don't need too much in the way of the distinct network features of 5G. It can be used to sort of break out things and connect, and potentially as backhaul to other forms of connectivity. The one that's in the middle of their ultra reliable, low latency connectivity is the one that's been grabbing all the headlines. The new features of 5G and the things that it can do to provide immense amounts of speeds that no one's ever seen before and support a huge variety of new use cases. The key for that is within private networks is guaranteed quality of service. So one of the benefits for private networks over public networks is the ability to say it will always be able to support a given level of throughput for a particular use case or a particular device, those sorts of things. And so you can guarantee that the robot that you're supporting on your manufacturing floor won't glitch out at any point. So it will always have the required low latency with the right setup. And so it can deliver that. And it can also support video across multiple endpoints. So there's potentially less need for a variety of endpoints and infrastructure to support the backhaul and so on. That kind of veers us into massive machine type communication, which is the third big use case. And so because of that high capacity, you can bring in many different devices. And so you can support thousands, millions overall in the network, but hundreds of thousands of devices in any given network potentially for private 5G. The key things for this overall are that you can bring a variety of different capabilities to suit enterprise needs, consistent personalized connectivity that will always work, that will always be able to deliver things that the enterprise needs when you bring all of this together. And you can then tailor that to make those individual use cases that we've already spoken about, those vertical specific capabilities that can be used. And underneath everything, there's the service-based architecture and the user and data plane separation, which can emphasize that security. So again, that's going to be a matter of communicating to end users about what 5G is and how it can do that. And so then it may take some time for the realization that you can have secure remote management, for example, that you can have the user plane managed remotely and the data plane remaining entirely on site. Those sorts of questions are going to come up fairly often as people get used to the capabilities of 5G. And again, going back to the question of solving problems, we're going to start seeing unified platforms in future as well. That 5G will be part of a bigger solution. There's been a lot of talk about whether private cellular will replace Wi-Fi, for example. That's not going to be the case, just partly because folks are still going to want to get their usage out of devices they already have, but also because it can supply different use cases. So you've got people that will be wanting to deploy devices across different networks and have it all contained within the same overall software platform. So you need to be able to bring cellular and Wi-Fi together in the same platforms, so that it can all be brought together as a single interface to make it simpler for either the managed service provider or the end user. So you're looking at different types of connectivity as well being used within the same network. This is already something that we're seeing within our enterprise survey. We had around 30% of cellular IoT users also using some form of unlicensed connectivity as well. So the reality on the ground is that if you're looking to deploy private cellular or support private cellular, you need to be able to take in unlicensed connectivity as well. And that's the reason that we've seen all of the mergers that you're seeing on your screens at the moment. You've seen Hewlett-Packard acquiring Ethernet. You're seeing Bolden Networks consolidating a lot of its portfolio companies, and you've seen Semtech recently acquire Sierra Wireless as well. That's all in an effort to bring licensed and unlicensed connectivity together so that it can be presented in that unified platform way, and so that it can so that those service-based models can be supplied. And with that network will also come some additional complexity as well. You will have to handle any potential roaming between Wi-Fi and cellular. There are some moves to do that already with things that Apple has been doing in the latest version of iOS. But overall, this is still something that the industry is figuring out. So again, we're still in the nascent stages of what this means for the market. And finally, this is an analyst presentation, so future projections are going to have to be taken in. We are expecting over 18,000 private networks to be deployed, or 18,000 5G private networks to be deployed by 2028. The key vertical for that is industrial and manufacturing, where there is going to be a clear majority of private networks deployed using 5G because they can use those advanced capabilities within their factory floors to potentially produce fully automated factories is the end goal, but that will be a long time in coming. We also see increasing use of private 5G within transport and logistics, and as well as just private 5G. Then we'll be looking to see converged networks with non-terrestrial network connectivity, satellite connectivity. One of the key benefits of private 5G that we've seen in the surveys that we've been running is that they want to end users want to be able to extend connectivity, make it available where it isn't. So in remote locations, and when those remote locations need to return to other places or need to move away, you need to bridge the gap between normal cellular connectivity and private cellular. So non-terrestrial networks will start to fill that particular gap. But we don't think that private LTE is going away. It's has been very, very serviceable for a large amount of use cases so far, particularly simpler forms of automation and automated vehicles within the mining sector has been possibly the biggest showcase of how private LTE can be stretched. And quite a few of the 5G benefits can also be can also be implemented to a lesser degree within LTE networks. So if there's a need for simpler connections or simpler networks, or networks where there is a ready body of devices out there, then private LTE will still remain very popular overall. And with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for listening to this overall presentation, and then introduce our panel, who are Christian BAYFU, who is a managing Christian Wagner, sorry, who is a managing partner at BAYFU. BAYFU is a systems integrator for private networks. So welcome to the panel, Christian.
Hello, James. Hello, audience. Thanks for being here.
And secondly, we have Curtis Govan, who is the Americas president for floLIVE. Curtis is joining us very early in the morning from Texas, so thank you very much for your time, Curtis. And floLIVE is an IoT connectivity company with one of the largest worldwide networks.
Well, glad to wake up for a good cause.
Thank you. We're very, very grateful to have you with us. And finally, we have Javier Borreguero, sorry, who is the Industry 4.0 head at Telefonica Tech, who is joining us from Spain. So thank you for joining us, Javier. Good to have you with us.
Good morning, and thank you, James, for inviting us.
No, good stuff. So I thought just to kick this off. This off. Oh, and just as a heads up as well to the audience, I would like to have some potential time for questions at the end. So please feel free to put your questions in, and we will have those towards the end of the session as well. So if you have anything to say, there will be a Q&A box somewhere that will pop up, and we will field those as we go. But just to kick things off, I've spoken a lot about solutions-driven networks, so to speak. That everyone is sort of wanting solutions as the key thing if they want to use private networks and deploy them well. So first of all, I wanted to talk about what connectivity what kind of things that private IoT networks need at this point in time. What are folks seeing on the ground for what people are after in terms of use cases? Christian, as a systems integrator, you've probably seen a good number of deployments on the ground. Could we start with yourself?
Yes, for sure. So we are active in the European market, and we see most probably some different use cases as Curtis in the US. We are the private network is a quite new thing. So we didn't make the history with private LTE. So we started with 5G because we have this band 43, which was hard to get end users and end user devices and modems at the end. But what we see, there is a demand, and there is a strong demand. So started from the automotive companies who wants to have really a quality of service in connections, in wireless connections for flexibilizing their production lines. So that's what we saw what was the first use cases. In the years now, when we are talking now about 22, 23, we see much more use cases on the logistics part. So we see here logistic areas where they need multiple connections on FTS or on AGVs, so autonomous ground vehicles or shuttles, which are connected and which cannot be handled by Wi-Fi because the missing quality of service, the availability of having multiple connections to them. So that is one of our main use cases now, where it comes to multiple connections on a small area, on an indoor area. Then I think this 5G private networks, they are really the only choice. The other topic is, every time when it goes in the production side from outside to inside, we see here challenges on existing or on traditional wireless connections on IT. There is a big a big advantage for the 5G network. Here it is. The use case is very simple. It's cost. It's number of access points. It's number of infrastructure they have to install, and here the killer reason is why to use 5G are simply costs. What we see here today.
Okay, cool. And what we've heard a bit about the European perspective there. Curtis, do you want to give us something from a perspective from the States?
Sure, happy to do that. I think from our perspective, kind of the main areas that we're seeing are agriculture, which is a very interesting one because a lot of farms today are very much automated. And so they have IoT devices there, but they're generally in poor coverage areas. So because they have poor coverage areas, they need a private network there. This is the case where I would say we categorize them as the small or pretty much ultra small mobile private network, maybe a few hundred devices or less in that case. But, everything from the precision agriculture that needs it there to the different irrigation systems they have. All of these are IoT devices that they want to connect to a back-end system to send to the providers information there. They need private networks for that. The other case there, Christian mentioned logistics. This is one where we're also seeing some good traction early on. And this one has to do with they have a concentration of devices that when they're public, they're perfectly fine there on the public network. But when they come back to the warehouse, it's there are too many devices at one site for the public network to handle. So they're moving on to the private network for those. They get their normal updates, reporting overnight, and they're ready to go for the next day. We see that same use case also for logistics when vehicles are going in and out of warehouse locations there where they need to do updates overnight. The key thing for this is the cost savings component. You mentioned earlier, part of the economics is part of the challenge in the industry, but this is one that's really clear. We have one customer that we talked to that they project that they'll save about 40% in their connectivity costs by doing the private network, doing all of the overnight stuff on the private network. And then when they move into the public network using our technology, our SIM technology, they're perfectly fine. They go back to the public piece there. The other one that I would say comes into play is just general office areas. Manufacturing, one of our customers there, they have push-to-talk devices now that are used to be over Wi-Fi. They're converting them to cellular. They have other devices that they use for just general communication, tablets within the factory or manufacturing plant. And all of those devices are now on private networks. But it's interesting, they have the same problem that, people take their push-to-talk device home. They take their tablet home, their mobile phone home. And so they're also doing that transition from private to public as well. So those are some of the key ones that we see in North America. I'll tell you in Latin America, South America, there we're seeing a lot of agriculture there, mining that you mentioned as well. Those are the key ones there, but also some manufacturing use cases as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fantastic. And Javier, did you want to kind of bridge the gap there between everything from Europe and Latin America? Because I know that you also bring the different perspective of being a network operator, because both BAYFU and floLIVE have different relationships with Spectrum in particular with this. So I'm curious about what differences that makes as well for Telefonica.
Yeah, sure. What we already have live deployments, mainly in South America, and has been very active in the last years, is about mining companies are using private networks deployments for telecontrol, the big haulage systems for transport the minerals. And this is a reality because it's something that the ecosystem with the whole system providers, Komatsu, Caterpillar, and other, was deployed maybe 5 years ago. So it's a solution that is already working, and we are very active in that. And also in South America and in Europe, we are deploying a number of ports. Same or similar use case is to telecontrol the big trucks and the mobile parts in the port. This is what is already live, let's say, but in the next future, in this year and the next year, what I can see in Europe, and more in Europe, I would say, is the deployments that will take advantage of the mobility feature of the private networks. This is basically for automation of the mobile robots. This is going to be the key area in any logistic application inside a factory, or even in the inbound or outbound logistic of the factory is going to be a key point. The second one has to do with the usage of the bandwidth of the 5G deployments, mainly the application for computer vision algorithms to solve all problems that was tried to be solved in the past with IoT sensors that now are going to be solved with computer vision algorithm. And to deploy those cameras, we need the bandwidth and the requirements of the 5G private deployment. And the next big thing that we are seeing is the coverage application. It has to do with the economics of what is the, let's say, the price per square meter to deploy a 5G radio network in comparison with other alternatives like definitely cable or Wi-Fi. And this is, for me, I see the three main areas that are going to be the next thing. And in the medium term, I can see two more. One has to do with the deterministic networks, time-sensitive networks. That is going to be the point to being able to cut the cable in the machines, in the chains, in the factories, mainly the PLCs and other components. And the next one is the use cases that are going to need to interact between them and not with a central node. This is for instance, the V2X, vehicle 2X, that is going to accelerate how the devices can connect by themselves, between themselves, without the necessity to be orchestrated by a central node.
Okay, great. But I'm hearing that there's basically a lot of use already being done with private networks in LTE. So my question to all of you then is, what's the necessity for 5G here? You've Javier, you said that things are now transitioning over to a lot more in terms of image processing, and it will get heavier. Is that just that will get heavier use because it needs to be able to shift those images properly? And so is 5G just an evolution then, or is it bringing out any particular new use cases? Is 5G plugging any use case gaps that weren't there previously with private networks? And that's just to anything that's to any of you guys for that.
Quick answer from my side. Mm-hmm. I think that for the use cases already deployed is it will be just an evolution and easy ways to deploy, ways to make the network more compact and easy to orchestrate network. These are the features for existing deployments and use cases. But for new deployments, the coverage, the price per coverage per square meter, the bandwidth, and the connectivity between vehicles and the others, definitely we need 5G. So the new use cases need 5G. For the existing use cases, we are going to take advantage of the industrialization and orchestration capabilities and capacity to combat the networks that brings 5G.
Mm-hmm.
No, I fully agree to Javier. The new use cases and the new capabilities, especially when it comes to locationing and what is now under under development, and then we getting more accuracy in locationing. That are use cases they are waiting on it, because then it is a value add. It is a really value add on what 5G can bring in, because otherwise, what is the alternative? It was an LTE network, it was a Wi-Fi network, and an additional location-based network, so locationing network. So that was the alternative. So this is something what is we are really waiting for, that the accuracy on locationing is getting much more better. So the developments are good. So it is we are very positive to get the solutions here. From the other thing, comparing LTE to 5G, what are the new use cases? I think in Europe the new use cases are only 5G, because as I said before, we were lacking on end user devices. Now we are getting these devices. It's starting now. My wish would be that they are coming a little bit more faster. The iPhones and the tablets and all these normal end user devices, they will support SA. That will be great. They will support SA seamlessly. But we are on a good way on that, and we get the modems now. We get the modems on 5G SA, on our bands, on N78. So I look really forward to have new use cases, new capabilities on the 5G technology.
I would say definitely go back to the agriculture one. The precision ag one is definitely looking forward to the enhanced location information that you get out of 5G. The other use cases that I think are still out, but I think they're preparing for the 5G component, where you have the ultra low latency component, where you can really do the remote control in the precision manner. These are the ones that we've seen that are definitely coming. And look, I think it's the devices need to come. Once the devices are coming from a chipset, from a module, from an end device perspective there, then I think we'll see the acceleration of some of these use cases and the demand, right, for the network to support it. We're a little bit delayed on that now, where I see like most of the use cases that are in place now are running 4G perfectly fine, but definitely see the advantage of having the 5G components in the near future.
And will 5G bring some differences in the business landscape, in the business case, how these models are deployed? I mean, typically that has been the case that you'll have quite extensive, say, capex contracts that will to deploy these networks. Are we seeing that that 5G is changing anything in how those business models are deployed?
Yes, we see there is a change. So the first steps on private network, it was that the network equipment deliver companies, they had they were proposing to deliver the system. What we see more and more, it goes more and more on a network as a service. So we see it's much more needed than only delivering hardware. You have to deliver integration. The best is to have to deliver also the ecosystem on the end user or the equipment side. So really an end-to-end view, and this is where we see the demand, because the industry is not taking care about every single component and integrate this as itself. It's not their job. The integration companies, they will play the major role here. They will go there. They will deliver the complete system, the complete service, and therefore we see slightly coming up new business models on that. So as Javier mentioned, as a square meter coverage, what does a square meter coverage costs, and this per month, this per user. So these are new business models which are coming up in this area.
Yeah, I think we have a little bit different perspective on our side, because our business is built around software as a service, core network as a service, CMP as a service, and then global connectivity. So we actually went to market with a OpEx model here, where I think is the barrier to entry is the first thing that we're trying to eliminate there. Barrier to entry, we can grow in tiers as you grow number of devices. So I think the first thing that happens with improving the economics from our perspective is more devices, more demand, more use cases, more devices, more demand. That will drive the ROI metrics down, so that we can easily go in and say, here's the cost. It's on an OpEx model. If you have more devices, then we can just tier you up from a cost perspective, but we start you low and then move up as you go. But to me, the number one thing that 5G brings in is the use cases. So we have more use cases in one facility, and that will help drive the economics there. But the OpEx model is our preferred model there, and I think it generally has been aligning with what our customers are looking for.
And one question from just from my side on that, our surveys have seen that folks aren't really sure how to evaluate private networks on that sort of a basis. So what sort of ROI tools or demonstrations or just proof of ROI are we seeing in the market at the moment? There's not a huge amount of publicly available information for that we can see. So I'm just curious as to what sort of things can be demonstrated in order to make that business case.
Yeah, it depends on the use case. I mentioned earlier the logistics one was really straightforward. They had a price that they're paying now for public. They took out the usage that they would have on the private versus public. It was really clear what they would benefit from the private network. I think the other cases, when you look at like manufacturing, it's a lot different, right? Because it appears as an added cost. So there, this is where we have to come in and work with them. Obviously, share our costs up front, but work with them to understand what their improvements are and how to measure that and quantify that. But I think for the most part, people are doing that. They understand where they're going to get additional efficiencies within manufacturing and what those efficiencies lead to from a cost savings perspective. And then we just put our cost in for the private network, and I think it works. So you got to be really careful, though. I know I mentioned this in a panel a couple of years ago, and this is like one of the early conversations: is what are we getting out of it? What's the ROI? What's the benefit ultimately? Because this is the number one failure for use cases. If you have the use case, you have the network, and you don't have the ROI, and that'll lead to failure, because we generally start with a proof of concept. So if the proof of concept doesn't validate the ROI, it often stalls or completely kills projects.
Yep, that's absolutely fair enough. And on that note, I just wanted to sort of have our final question as to what sort of things are holding private 5G back at the moment. We've mentioned some of them, but what sort of things in your experiences can do that stalling of projects, or maybe on the macro sense, what more is needed to help roll things out? I think from my perspective on the broader side, a lot of it is going to be about availability of spectrum, because one of the other things that we've noticed that in various places that you've got mobile operators being one of the key partners because they hold the spectrum, whereas where it gets more liberalized, then it gets to be a more active market. So I'm wondering what other things folk are seeing to bring this particular market forward. And Javier, I think, seeing as I've potentially cast you slightly as the villain in this sort of a question, what is it from your perspective as an operator holding these things back? So you obviously have all of that access to spectrum, at least as far as it's available within any given country.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the spectrum is one of the key points here, and it has not only to do with the operators, but with the regulators in any country, and how the same slices of the spectrum are going to be available across countries and across regions. That is also quite a nightmare. But this is real, and this is going to be solved in the medium term. And a part of that, I will add because all the time we talk about the devices, the use cases, the demonstration of the business case, but all these three things are part of the spectrum. In my opinion, has to do with the working as an ecosystem. Is to develop, to work together with the solution provider. I mean, the solution provider in the manufacturing industry, or the solution provider in the port or in the minery, in order to let's say have inbuilt 5G capabilities in their robot machine or whatever. Doing in this way, we solve the problem of the devices, we solve the problem of the use case, and at the same time, we solve the problem of the business case, because we design something that is by default 5G inbuilt with 5G inbuilt capabilities. So this is my point. The ecosystem working together with solution providers. Solution, I mean industrial solution provider, with integrators and with operators for sure.
Mm-hmm. And from is there anything else from your perspective, Christian, on anything that needs to be sorted out?
Yeah, one thing is the frequency spectrums in the for sure. I completely underline this, and this should be harmonized, and this should not only be harmonized in terms of we have the same frequency band. It should be harmonized, and we have the same obligations on that frequency spectrum. For example, in Germany, we are not allowed to have a roaming interface, to have some other interfaces outside. So this is only a data island, for example. Yeah. On the other hand, we are lacking with this national country codes and with this number of codes. So we cannot put these networks, these private networks together as it is normally. Yes, for sure, Curtis, you have your solution on the SIM card, which is very, very intelligent, which helps to mitigate these problems at the end. But here we see, when we talk to the customers, to the industry, and then our first question is always, what do you want to do with your 5G network, and what is your benefit on that? And very often it comes, yes, we have a bad coverage on mobile network there. So do you want to have a DAS system, or do you want to have a 5G network? And but they want to have much more use cases based on the 5G private networks than only their logistics, than only their sensoring networks and automation networks. They want to have more, and this means voice, still voice communication, outside, inside, roaming, and all this stuff. So this is something where we see this is a hindering point which should be clarified and which should be worked out a little bit more.
Okay, and because we are about on time, Curtis, could you give us some a final perspective on things? If there was an obstacle for the private 5G market that you want to see gone, what is it, and how is it going to disappear?
Oh wow, an obstacle. Look, I'll say the spectrum is a key component. Say in the U.S. we have the CBRS spectrum that was opened up. I think this opened the door to the possibilities, and we're seeing a lot of proof of concepts, early stage. One of the challenges in adoption is that we're dealing with a lot of industries that it takes time to adopt new technology, right? So that time piece will come. But I still think the spectrum question needs to be answered and clarified, as Christian mentioned there. I think there has to be a commercial model with the spectrum that helps the operators, because they own the spectrum. That to me is a key piece to happen, because the use cases will grow, the adoption will grow, but that spectrum piece is still one that's very critical. And I know I've seen from operators here in the US where they don't see the economic benefit to them on sharing the spectrum, right? So that piece has to be solved. I think it's mainly commercial. The technical piece, I think, will come. It's very much in development, and that's a matter of time, but we still have to get past the spectrum.
Yeah, I know that's been a recent concern in India, that they were thinking that if you don't have private 5G, that's sort of the exclusive purview of the operators over there, then there's not much point in private 5G. Is the Indian government's perspective on it. So that those questions do need to be sorted out. And working with the operators seems to be the best way to do that. But that is about all we have time for, gentlemen. We've run over a little slightly, so thank you ever so much for your time. We didn't actually get any questions in the end, but thank you ever so much for your time, and I do hope that that you enjoy the rest of this conference. I will hand back to Meth for this one now. Thank you guys, and goodbye.